You might have seen online that there's two transgender boxers fighting women in the Olympics. Is that true? No. But should they be allowed to fight these specific women in the Olympics? I also think the answer is no as well. When I first saw this, I was like, whoa, this looks like there's a transgender person in the Olympics beating up women. And all the other media coverage around it all seem to point to the fact that this person is a man beating up women. But after reviewing it more, it doesn't appear that that's the case. But what exactly has set the world ablaze with these two Olympic athletes competing in the women's boxing division? These two Olympians are Iman Khalif and Lin Yu-ting. Let's go a little bit further into the story. With the Taiwanese boxer, I don't have all the specific details, but I do have more detail around Iman Khalif. So you might be asking, well, are these transgender women that are boxing in a women's division? And the answer is no, they're not transgender. Both of these athletes are DSD, which is known as differences in sex development. It's a rare condition involving the genes, hormones, and the reproductive organs, including the genitals. And essentially what happens is, with these people that suffer from DSD, is they're born and their genitalia has some ambiguousness around it. So what the doctor does at the time is makes an assessment based on if they're going to be a male or a female, and they're assigned that gender at birth. Essentially, all the science and research I've done for this is from Ross Tucker. He's a sports scientist and a scientist for World Rugby. He has a fantastic podcast to check out which explains the timeline of the events leading up to how we got into the situation with these two athletes. And it also explains what DSD is and the history of these specific athletes in these different circumstances. And look, all my interpretations of the science come from his podcasts. So the doctor records them as either a boy or a girl, and then they're raised in that specific way. So you can see on their passports or their documents that they would be legally assigned that gender at birth. So essentially a DSD person who has a XY chromosome or is born biologically as a male has these testicles. They might not have the other parts that make them a male. When they get to a puberty stage, they start to get all the different developments of that gender. So what I'm seeing is that these are women. However, they're born with testicles. So this has a significantly unfair biological advantage due to having testosterone during puberty. Might be born and then the doctor says they're a male. And then when they reach puberty, whatever main biological hormone development, whether it's the ovaries or the testes, will come into full fruition, and then they will be that gender. But they still have an XX or an XY chromosome. This is exactly the same situation as Caster Semenya, who was the Olympic runner who won a number of gold medals, and she suffered from DSD and biologically had testicles. So it's technically true that these are legally female athletes. However, most likely they are biological male based on the tests conducted. And these are tests conducted by the IBA, which said they both have XY chromosomes. So if the IBA, the World Boxing Association, disqualifies them, then why did the IOC clear them to compete? The IBA was running the box in the Olympics for a significant amount of time, but for the last two games, they haven't. The IOC has run it. So IOC has said, yep, okay, we're going to allow you to compete. And the IBA statement said that they disqualified Lin Yu-ting and Iman Khalif from the IBA Women's World Boxing Championships, and it was due to their failure to meet eligibility criteria. They also underwent a testosterone examination whereby the results are confidential, but they both determined that they did not meet the required necessary eligible criteria and were found to have competitive advantages over the other female competitors. The IBA president, Umar Kremli, told the Russian news agency last year after they were disqualified competition, he's quoted as saying, "Based on the results of the DNA tests, we identified a number of athletes who tried to deceive their colleagues and pretended to be women. Based on the results of these tests, it was proven they have XY chromosomes. Such athletes were excluded from the competition." From what I understand, based on someone who has a significant background into this, these are women who have testicles. And this would still be giving you an unfair biological advantage because when it gets to puberty time, then you get all the benefits of being a biological male. From my understanding, 2/3 of DSD athletes reassign their gender after going through puberty. And the IC has come out and said, well, these are women through and through. They have passports, and on their documents it states that that is their gender. And look, I understand that argument. They felt like a woman their whole life. They're born and assigned that they're a woman from the doctor, then it wouldn't be until puberty that they had these significant changes that would put them apart from their own gender. Also, you can empathize that they will essentially feel like a woman their entire lives and then they want to compete in this sport. However, in the whole fairness game, we have Caster Semenya. She had testicles, high levels of testosterone for her own lifetime development, and her own human biology was an advantage as well. Once we account for puberty and someone's growing into that male frame, they have such a big advantage in terms of power and strength. And my feelings are, in terms of competitive sports, there might be some sort of way for it to be balanced. But in terms of boxing, this is where it can get incredibly dangerous. There's some studies I've seen where they get a group of males and females and they measure all of their punching power. And what they found is that male punching power was 162% higher than females. So what that means is that if male was to punch a female, they are 2.62 times stronger in their punching power. And when you think about women and men developing and growing over time, men have thicker bones, thicker skulls, plus how they're growing through puberty is going to give them a significant advantage, right? But when it comes to combat sports, these can have long-lasting implications. These women could be potentially killed in one of the bouts. And when you take away all the fairness and all these other elements to it, you go, well, the safety is going to be the most important thing when it comes down to these athletes competing. Other studies have shown that males' upper bodies on average have 75% more muscle and 90% more strength than females. And when you equate that to a sport, when it comes down to it getting punched in the head and the body, then it can have serious implications on someone's life and well-being. So taking out the politics of the situation and everything else, this could be extremely dangerous. Some of the arguments online have said, oh, well, if you look at this boxer's record, they've got 9 losses, they've lost to other women before. And yeah, that's true. But when you have this significant advantage, it's still unfair to the other competitors, but even more so, there's a high risk that someone could get injured and killed. I've seen arguments on the right and the left. The right's argument around this, oh, these are transgender boxers fighting in this women's competition. And they're not exactly transgender. They haven't been one gender and they're changing their gender. They've basically had the same gender the entire life. It's just that they have the biological equipment that potentially makes them a male. And in the left-leaning argument, they're saying this person's always been a woman. They've lived their whole life as a woman. And yeah, it's true. They generally probably are a woman. They've lived their life as a woman. However, they're still turning into a specific gender and it's giving them significant advantage, and that could potentially kill someone. Ultimately, they probably shouldn't be allowed to fight women in boxing because it's potentially dangerous. I don't know what the solution is in terms of where they could compete or how that competes as a thing, but when you're putting the whole competition's athletes at serious risk of injury or death, then that's something that needs to be involved when it comes down to this specific sport. And look, take out all the political genders, take out the transgender debate, take out whether I identify as any of those specific things. When it comes down to the fact that these specific athletes could have an advantage that could kill the opponents, then that's something that seriously needs to be reviewed. And it's not the athlete's fault that any of this happens, and they shouldn't be taking the blame for these things. If the ISC is saying that they're cleared to compete and that it's completely fair that they compete, and when the World Boxing Association says they shouldn't, it seems to be that there could be some sort of misinterpretation around the rules. And who loses in all this? Essentially the other athletes, these women athletes that could be seriously hurt.